This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Hello, listeners. Welcome back. This is Brian for Breaking Down Security. Mr. Betcher is going to be in the role of a guest this week, and we brought Michael Gough along as his sidekick. And maybe we're going to talk about a little bit of software that Mr. Betcher has developed based on an idea that Michael Gough had about log analysis. So, Mr. Betcher, maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've never really given your backstory like that.
Never have?
I don't believe so.
No, we did origin stories. Remember that?
Yep, that was 2004, so nobody knows. Nobody's listened to
long
2004.
Ago. Okay, well, I wasn't prepared for this. I can't even remember where I started.
Well, you were born in a hospital. We know that.
Yeah. Raised in the country, that kind of thing. Went to a big college, got a computer science degree, learned how to program, got a job as a level 1 developer. Then I moved into software support. It was kind of a hybrid software support development type thing. And then moved into management on the level 1 support team, and then stepped into what else? I did a gig as IT services management for a liaison, basically, to a data center. And then that's where I stepped into security, when you had a need for security people. And, I decided to delve into that role and haven't looked back.
Okay.
And
of course, we've got Michael Gough here. What's that?
And that's where you come in, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, you actually interviewed me for that job. It's where you currently work.
At the place. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Michael Gough has been so kind to script up our podcast for us this week. So I'm going to start off with the first question, Michael. How do you analyze malware in a lab?
Carefully. Well, that's an interesting question. You have to come to my training to find out. So it's a complicated process. Many of us that do this sometimes painfully go through and use VMs. We use remnux. There's a million ways of Sunday to skin this cat. I prefer a bare bones environment where I take malware that I can grab from, let's say, a phishing attempt, or potentially from a URL I find that's serving up malware, download the payload, or go to the lab, download it from there, surf the website, bring the malware from the phish in and whatnot. Because there's a goal. Whenever you do malware analysis, there's a goal and there's an objective. And your goal's got to be to get this done as fast as possible. Because I don't know about you, but I have other job duties. And I love to do this, but I also like my other job duties. So I have to balance doing malware analysis and getting some data out of it that's useful, that can improve my active defense position and improve my detection. And more importantly, the objective being, I found this IP or IPs that this malware is talking out to. I found the file locations, directory locations, the regwax, whatever that this malware did on the Windows environment. And now I know I can go and say, all right, anybody who went to these IPs definitely got infected. And now I can issue a cleanup for our help desk folks. And they can actually go out to the device and I can walk them through a cleanup. And that's the objective, right? The goal is do it quickly. The objective is obviously get rid of it. And doing that takes some time, right? You got to copy the thing over to the lab. You got to prep the lab, right? Simple. That doesn't change no matter what you do. You execute the malware, and then you painstakingly have to see and do all the little tips and tricks to figure out what altered on the system. You got to baseline it, do the diff on it. You got to do reg dumps. You got to look at all the obvious locations. I apply malware management, which means I've read all these reports. I have my little spreadsheet that I use, and I look at all these different indicators and I say, okay, I've checked all these areas, and so what do I have? And that takes me well over an hour to do that basic thing to try to get those tidbits of information out of the malware.
All right, so you mentioned the reports that you like to look at. It takes about an hour. Could you explain where you get those reports from, and what do you do with them when you use them?
Yeah, I take reports from all the different incident response companies and AV companies, right? Kaspersky SecureList has good virus reports. They do some in-depth technical reports as well. Eyesight Partners did the target breach. TrustWave has them. Obviously, Mandiant has a lot of them. And you take these reports from various sources. There's lots of them out there, and you read through them for the tidbits, and that's what you apply using malware management logic, and you apply that to your malware lab to help you find stuff. I do post these URLs on my website at malwarearchaeology.com under resources. So for those wanting to get a good start on a bunch of these, as I come up with them, I will add them to the list. So it gives people kind of a single source to go to get quite a few of them. And they can get an idea of the kinds of reports that are out there and who's publishing them, so they can harvest them themselves, sign up for RSS feeds. And that's kind of where I get a lot of them is people announce this stuff. And I follow some of these companies' RSS feeds, and so when they come out with APT30, I know to download them. Or Duco 2, for example, when Kaspersky published that. And
Okay, so these are regular reports that come out.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking like Verizon data breach investigation report, and I'm like, well, why do you continue reading that thing? So.
No, the DBIR won't give me much in regards to helping with malware. Basically, you're looking at someone else's malware report, and you're applying the tidbits and artifacts you can pull from that, and you apply it into your lab work to say, where should I look and what should I look for? Hey, there's a pattern here amongst all these reports. I should probably focus on those items.
Okay. So, Mr. Betcher, you were the code monkey on this. What kind of platform are you using for this application?
You mean what language I'm using?
Yeah, I'm sorry, language.
Pretty sure it's right. Java and Flash, right?
Yeah, I chose Java because that doesn't introduce any other attack vectors at all.
Well, that's
no. I use the language of the operating system. I coded it in C. That way, there's nothing to install. The only thing you do is copy it on your computer somewhere and double click.
Okay.
So the beauty of that is, you can push out this program to all the systems in your environment and execute it. So it is command line. So yeah, that's why I chose C.
Okay. So Mr. Gough, you what kind of indicators do you like to gather when you're doing forensics in your log files?
Well, I don't use the word forensics. I consider forensics an old school term in regards to how to do traditional forensics. I think we need to separate what we do into groupings so that we can understand the focus of what that thing is. So forensics to me and to a lot of people are traditional forensics. I'm going to duplicate a drive, and I'm going to go down chain of custody and make sure everything's done by the book. Log the timeline, the whole spiel. I may be looking for employee criminal, et cetera, et cetera. That's not my goal in regards to doing malware management or malware discovery or basic malware analysis. My goal there is to get the artifacts out of it in order to improve active defense, detection, and remediation. That's the primary goal.
Okay. And you try to do this as quickly as possible for what reason?
We all have other job duties to do, right? I do more than just malware analysis. I'm an architect, analysis, analyst guy that has to do other things, work on other projects, implementation, whatnot, trying to get things fixed, improved, and all that good stuff, like we all do. So it's not my primary job duty to sit there all day and play with malware, as fun as that might be. I have other duties. So the goal is, in this particular case, as it should be in anybody's incident response program or anybody's malware management program, is speed. If somebody gets nailed with a large phishing attack, or a phishing attack A with an attachment or B with a URL, and you have a lot of people that click it, unfortunately, well-crafted phishing is a very high success rate in regards to larger companies, that you have to discover what that thing did fairly quickly to put it into other mechanisms and tools you might have, say Splunk or Loggly or ArcSight or whatever you may have, QRadar, and discover who might have, in the example of malware, you explode it in a lab, you find that it visited 2-3 IPs. Who else visited those 2 or 3 IPs, so you can immediately get those people contained and then start the remediation process. That is the primary goal, and why speed is important. You should be able to, your goal in incident response is to invoke any kind of change within an hour. That's really something you should target for and consistently refine for, not 209 days, which is kind of the average mean time to detection. You should be able to evaluate some basic artifacts out of a piece of malware under an hour, apply those to other tools if you have them, and contain this fairly quickly so that you don't have an event.
So why would blue teamers even want to analyze the malware?
Why would we want to? The artifacts. I explode a piece of malware, I get the IP addresses that these things go to. I can see potentially the behavior that they execute on the box. That's important, because if I have to clean up a box, you have 2 options, right? Clean it. Well, 3 options. Run AV. I guess I have to drink because I said that. So you can run AV, you can clean the malware manually, or you reimage the box. And obviously, if you want to be certain that something's clean, you can reimage. And I recommend programs definitely have fast reimaging, but still that may take a couple hours for a user to get a new system. And those artifacts are the IP address, the file locations, the directories used, the registry keys that are altered, the services that are installed. Translate that into Linux. You're going to have daemons, you're going to have config file alterations, and you're going to have file and directory modifications. The registry is unique in Windows, big database of lots of places to hide stuff. And so you need to gather those pieces and parts so that you can pull those out and send them to your vulnerability scanners, maybe write some scripts. Let's say you're using Nessus, there's some scripting ability in there, and you can look for things, or you have configuration management, you can script some stuff in there and look for things, or PowerShell it and look for things, or obviously some bigger tools like some of the incident response programs that are pretty large and well known out there, the Carbon Blacks of the world, or other competitors, Confer or whatnot. And you want to go find these tidbits in your environment so that you can isolate these boxes very quickly, and those artifacts are key.
When we say analyze malware, it's not reverse engineering it, seeing how it works, what makes it tick, and all that. It's more, what does it do? Right. What does it do to your system? How does it maintain persistence? Those types of things.
Yeah.
So
I don't really
you can. Go ahead.
I don't really care what the malware is actually doing from a tips and tricks perspective. So in the malware training, one of the things I'm going to share with people is we have to break down how we analyze malware, or all the way to forensics. So I break it up this way. Basic malware analysis is on the left, and forensics is on the right. Things on the left are quicker and easier. Things on the right are harder and longer. And the goal is speed. I have other things to do, and I want enough information that allows me to use my other tool sets so that I can potentially contain an event. So we have basic analysis, advanced analysis, we have reverse engineering, and we have forensics. And reverse engineering would be including, obviously decompiling the software. I can actually throw that malware over the fence to a third-party IR firm that does this in a lab, right? I know these guys, and that's their job. They sit in a lab and they play with this stuff all day. I can throw it over the fence and have an answer in a couple days, and it allows me to move on to do something else. So I focus at speed and data that I can get quickly, and that's where basic analysis goes. I may do a little bit of advanced analysis if it's tricky. Obviously, I was involved with WinNTI events, so I had to do a lot of that. But for the most part, I want to stay on that left side, faster and quicker. I have other job duties.
Okay, so before we did the podcast, you had mentioned that you were using a tool called Splunk Storm.
Yeah, it's gone now.
Yeah, and Splunk is not a sponsor of our podcast, so we don't condone or whatever, sponsor them or whatever. So you needed a tool to kind of fill the void that Splunk Storm left. Now, what did Splunk Storm do for you that it doesn't do anymore?
So, well, it existed before. It doesn't exist now. So it was a free option, low amount of data and upload and retention, but long enough that for those of us who did malware analysis, could load the agents on our boxes where we did lab analysis work, whether it's a VM or bare bones. I prefer bare bones, and monitor all the log traffic just like we do in the enterprise. And that was really cool because everything I have in my Splunk knowledge, I personally recommend people on the low end side, if you want a really good solution to start doing this, you have to pay for it. Loggly is a great option. Matter of fact, I would consider it number 2 behind Splunk, and that says a lot because I've evaluated a lot of those damn products and a cost-effective solution. So I potentially could use Loggly in a lab, etc. But I really gained a lot of value out of taking my enterprise data and using it in a lab on Splunk Storm, isolating it. I don't want my malware junk in my enterprise Splunk environment at my previous gigs. So that's where it fit. It allowed me to use the same intelligence, copy paste. If I found something in a lab and tweaked a query or report, an alert in the lab, I would just copy and paste that into production, and bam, I immediately had value there. Right? That's why it was powerful. That void is gone. So there's nothing there now that allows me to easily, cheaply, freely, in a very small amount. I mean, it's a lab. I need 1, 2, 3 systems, and what do we have available to us? Oh, I can build a huge, open source multi-server, elk stack box and try to maintain that. But it doesn't give me exactly what I'm looking for. It's too cumbersome in regards to the amount of artifacts that I'm looking for quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you had this idea, and I don't know how. So that I'm going to ask Mr. Betcher this. So the idea was out there, and you decided you were going to tackle this project.
Right. So what was missing was, man, this malware analysis took so much time. You got to compile the correct logs. You got to, get your machine configured in order to produce these logs for you that you can get some use out of them. So that took a lot of time to build that machine up and get the right things, the right artifacts together. So, and then Michael had these scripts that he ran, right, that he created to help speed up the process.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking one day, and Michael was like, man, I wish we had something that could take, what I do and sort of automate it. And I was like, well, let me give it a stab. So I gave him one version, one day to just kind of look at the logs and print it out in a spreadsheet type format. And he ripped the damn thing apart. He says, this doesn't work. This is it. And it's broke. And he broke it, basically. He took it and he broke it. So I was like, okay, challenge accepted. But he did say that this was pretty good data, and it was presented fairly well. It's just broken. So, I'm
good at pointing out things.
Went home. I went home and bandaged myself up and created version 2 in a few days. And he was like, man, this is awesome. He kept talking how the data that he wanted was presented in such a way that he could actually use it and use it quickly. And, it would help him and many other blue teamers like him save a lot of time. I mean, we're talking about an hour or more per incident just on what we had. So,
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. It kind of took off from there, and we started saying, well, it'd be cool if it did this, and then I'd implement that. It'd be cool if it did this, I'd implement that, and it just grew and grew, and shoot, we've got so many ideas. I think it would take a couple of years to finish them all up.
Okay.
Right now.
So the name of the application is called LogMD, or Malicious Discovery Tool. So, you guys have a demo for us, I would imagine.
Will the demo gods allow us to demo?
We've got an alpha version going. So, you want me to share my screen?
Let me see. I have the Windows version. You have the Windows. Yeah, it's not difficult. Okay, so in the Skype interface, you just right-click on the current phone or the current conversation and go share screens.
On the main console of mine, you click call at the top menu and share screens, and then it'll pop up an option to let you pick which screen.
All right.
Beep, beep.
And there we are.
Let me record. So in addition to the audio that you're hearing on the podcast at this point, we also have a video of the demonstration of LogMD done by myself, Mr. Betcher, and Michael Gough. The link is in show notes, so if you want to check that out, you can, or you can just continue on with the audio portion of this podcast. There are some things in it that don't translate well to video and audio, and there's still some good suggestions and points that you will get from the podcast at this point. So you can either continue listening to the podcast or go to YouTube and download the video.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting to me is, I obviously know a lot about logs. I do a lot of presentations. I think you guys have, I know Betcher sees them all the time, but even Break, you've probably seen me do this in one of the ISSA chapter meetings or whatnot. And I always say I came up there to Seattle, beside Seattle. Mm-hmm. And there's certain things I know about logs. And I would say the number one thing that people asked me is, but I don't know what to set. I need help doing that. And so that was a challenge in talking to the Betcher to say, well, we got to solve this, right? I hate to say we got to do something for the auditor, but that is the number one thing I get asked is, what do I set? So I created the Windows logging cheat sheet to help that out. It's very popular, but okay, great. It's a piece of paper. It tells you what to do, but some people need even a little bit more help. And so fortunately, Betcher did a great job implementing this brain dump of mine. I think his comment when I sent them, the outline was like, wow, no, really, wow. And then he had to go do it. and today I fist bumped at him and said, wow, good job. It's awesome.
All right. Well, we're recording if you want to go ahead and
all right.
show
So
what you're doing.
when you kick off the tool, it's going to check if you've got the proper auditing set. And if you don't, it's going to just die, right? It's going to tell you, okay, you need these things because I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. You got to set these things first. So when you kick it off, it'll show you, hey, I'm trying to read this white list. You don't have it. I'm trying to read this other white list. You don't have it. And that's fine. But then it gets into the audit policies of your computer. So it says, I need this particular object access registry set as success. So then you have to go in and set that before the tool will run. So let's see if I can.
There's an important point to make here. One of the challenges is that Windows by default will not collect anything useful for a security person. It just by default doesn't record anything. And that's one of the first agendas I have in any place I get involved with or consult with people on. It's like, look, you have to enable and configure this stuff first, or there'll be no value. So it didn't make any sense for this tool to run unless the thing was configured to collect the data that we want to collect. So just stop and then force the person, right? Try to push them down the path of, you got to turn it on first. You got to turn it on first. And that's kind of the goal here is to help lead people to actually enabling the things that are required.
Now you see it's also looking for certain registry items as well. But for this version, I didn't make that a requirement. It will be. So I go ahead and run the tool again, and then it starts collecting the data from your logs, okay? And this is one, since I didn't set these policies a few days in advance, there's not much to collect on this machine. But it did give me a report, which says, guess what? Here's what you have set. So we have all your audit policies here, the CIS benchmarks, what they recommend. We've got the Windows logging cheat sheet, what it recommends, and then the current computer and any notes that may apply to those. So you see that I don't have PowerShell enabled on this computer, and it gives me some footnotes. How do I add these? And of course references as well. So this is a report that you can create for your machine, to give to an auditor, or if you are an auditor, say, hey, run this tool, give me this report, let's see what you have set. It's great if you're, Michael, you want to go into it, if you're an investigator or a
Right. So
contractor going in to investigate a breach.
the first thing, which Betcher fortunately found out that I laughed about, I was involved in the Center for Internet Benchmarks, both Windows and heavily in the HP UX when I worked at HP. And I lobbied for getting the CIS benchmarks when it was back in the XP 2000, 2003 days to rearrange the benchmarks to match the alphabetical order of GPO, group policy objects. Betcher found in the course of actually writing this that the order in which the stuff spit out was not alphabetical, which made a bit of a challenge, because if you're trying to take this data and go to your GPO and set the data, right, set these settings, you're going to see account log on first, you're going to see account management second. The actual dump, by the way, Windows does it, is system is first. So you end up jumping around. You know what happens when that occurs. Mistakes happen. You miss something. Yeah, it's very
this particular order here, which if you use audit poll get, it'll dump it out in the order that it is in the system.
Yeah, and that's not real practice. Yeah, it was really kind of mundane. So, being that I'm an auditor, I'm actually a certified information security auditor, CISA, ISACA certified. Done that lots in the course of my career. Look, I need to provide something to the people that are making recommendations to companies, and this allows me to cut and paste this piece of information and put it in the back of my report saying, you really need to go further than CIS does. I can demonstrate to you why the Windows logging cheat sheet is better. And in the course of this tool, you would actually see that data. And then this PC would also be indicative to what a typical enterprise system would have set. So if this was a basically domain attached machine, you ran this would be what your GPO looked like. And now you can guide these people into setting these. We plan to add more things like obviously NIST and whatnot, and put these in here as well, and give you footnotes. And as Windows 10 and 2016 come out, make those things that are new to that point out for those of us who remember the oldest stuff, and try to really help push these guys into changing and recording these things. Because even though in LogMD we only collect certain things for security related, once if I'm a incident guy and I'm looking at this tool and I'm going to run the tool and look for things, I only had to enable what made the tool work. But now if I have to go back to the box or the environment in general, let's say we did this through GPO, and I wanted to go back to those suspect boxes, if you don't turn all the things on that are recommended here, I'm not going to have the additional data that I'm going to need to further and fully investigate and or print the logs to be able to turn over to, obviously our federal friends, our bureau friends. And they constantly tell people, look, I can't help you. You want to say, who did this? How did this happen? I can't help you if you don't have the logs turned on. And so the idea here is to kind of drive people to turn this stuff on, guide people to what to turn on, and even give them a tool to get them started so they can see the value of what can be collected.
Okay. So Betcher, you were creating a tool that uses the Windows commands that are already on the system. So you're not you created something that just interfaces with other.
I make Windows API calls.
Yeah,
right? That's all I do. I'm using Windows to help discover malware in your environment, help your logging. Right. Okay. So there's nothing to install. You just double click, like I said, and that's it. Yeah. You don't have to install Perl or Python or Ruby or Java. It's all, there embedded in your operating system. I just help. The program just helps you know what to set. I mean, look right here, credential validation. CIS and Windows logging cheat sheets say you need to audit success and failure, but, by default, Windows does not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. It's important to note that
is this the first step of LogMD, just basically making sure the host is logging what it's supposed to?
Yeah, meet the requirements of the tool first, and then we can go further. So
based on the best practice of the industry and the experts that say this is what you need to collect.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
It also, Betcher pointed out that when we mentioned malware, this tool has far extensive uses outside of the malware lab. This thing started from the fact that I was assessing a lot of malware and I wanted to speed that up. and I wrote a bunch of scripts. So I'm a script master, and I do that because, again, least common denominator. Working in consulting for all the years, I know what every Windows box has on its system. And if I write my scripts to work that way, they'll work everywhere. Same thing with using shell scripts for Nix systems. I went to clients with HP that had HPUX that had Perl, but they had different versions of Perl, right? I went to clients that had Java, but they had different versions of Java. The original CIS benchmark scoring tool was written in Java. And so if you didn't have the requirements, these things didn't run well, and there were a lot of issues with it. So the idea was initially to solve a specific problem, but it became very apparent very quickly that this had a much more extensive scenario. For example, we already here have a tool that auditors can use, or IT people can use, or even implementers can use for any log solution to get a client started to collect something useful. So right there, you've got an architect assistant tool. You can measure the auditing. You can give it to the auditors. So you have an auditing tool, right? So that's just one purpose. We haven't even got into any of the InfoSec related stuff yet, other than compliance and check the box and whatnot. PCI tells you need to audit. This actually tells you what exactly you need to audit, and actually in a lot of ways tells you how. The report obviously gives you details. We'll get into that in a second. There's whitelists. We all know that there's a lot of stuff on the system that's noise, normal noise, or the information that spits out isn't really worth anything to us security people. But keep in mind, this isn't necessarily just for security and malware. This will find failed and successful logins. So this is a behavior, a malicious detection tool, which means you can use it for anything in regards to the system that's abnormal, internal employee issues, potentially misbehaving applications. But then, of course, our focus initially was malware. It's clear that this can be used for a lot of purposes, and I'm guessing we're going to get requests to expand it for various things. So malware analysis lab, that's what it was designed for, and we'll show you kind of some of the outcomes of that. Investigate a suspect system. I don't know if that thing's infected. And so what we'll do, and I'll show you a copy of my output, very large raw output, and I'm going to actually show you how fast I can parse through the data in Excel and get to the point where I can say, yep, got nothing in my box that worries me. I think that's powerful, because now I have some idea, short of it being that upper 5% of super secret stealthy APT, that my box is clean. And that's powerful. We just really don't have that in the industry.
When you have a machine that's potentially infected, somebody says, I click this link, I need this thing to be checked. What's the first thing that your IT department does? Well, if McAfee didn't catch it, or Norton, they'll go grab a copy of Malwarebytes on a USB stick, shove it in, install it, and then start running a scan. What happens if Malwarebytes doesn't find it? They say it's clean, right?
Yeah.
But is it really clean? What happens with malware is you execute it, and then most of the time it will delete itself and install a new copy, or it'll go to command and control and download a new version of itself, right, with a different signature. So it always stays off the radar for AV. At least the good ones do. And Michael, you may be able to go into, or I know you'll be able to go into more detail about that, but you've had scenarios where you've been told, yeah, this system's clean, and you knew for a fact that it had malware on the machine.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? I'm one of those skilled people that, you tell me something's clean, I'm gonna challenge you. If I have a gut feeling, gut feeling is actually in my training material, because some of us have experience, and that's all we have to go on is a gut feeling. I have to give a lot of kudos to a former coworker of mine. We had a Linux box environment, and the stress vulnerability came out, and one of our engineers looked at it and said, yeah, I'm not finding anything. And my colleague said, yeah, something's telling me something's there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it. They didn't just do that to the box. And sure enough, persistence paid off, and we looked and looked and looked, and sure enough, through his persistence, he actually found the rootkit. And that's experience. That's just the way we work, right? So sometimes if you don't know, well, that's what you have to do. You have to apply our logic into some tool set, and that's what we've done here, and apply malware discovery techniques to see and prove and try to validate with a fairly high certainty that this box is probably okay to go. And that's the logic there.
Okay. So you've done level one, which is run the script and make sure that the host is actually logging to a specific level. What do you do after that with the tool?
Well, I guess, Michael, this is where you take over on your demo,
Okay.
if you can share your screen.
I am sure I can. Well,
So what we could do, one
did you hit
thing we
stop?
could do.
Did you do stop sharing?
Oh, no.
I think there's a.
Right click. There we go.
Sweet.
Stop sharing. So one thing you could do is to try and detect persistence on the machine. So if the machine wasn't set for proper logging to begin with, you can then use LogMD to help you set the right logging. And then once it is set, reboot your machine and then see what happens on a reboot. Obviously, if malware has to be persistent, or if it's programmed to be persistent, it has to save itself on disk when the machine is shut down and then load itself again when the machine boots up. And so what we can do with LogMD is find that and detect that persistence at work.
All right.
Now, it's important to note that that means it has to trigger some behavior that the Windows logging is triggering. There's a lot of discussion. I've had some with some pen testers, and my own personal experience with some APT that there are some very clever ways that look normal in startup for being persistent, but the malware discovery process will find that kind of oddity. So this isn't trying to fill that particular gap. But there are other behaviors in the course of an infection and or a reboot to trigger an infection. Is that there potentially are auto run locations. Commodity malware uses very obvious locations, and so this isn't going to address that 5%. Clever, quote unquote, really is somewhat sophisticated malware. Far to use term in regards to malware. This is not going to find those conditions it wasn't designed to. That is a unique case, but there are other techniques you can add to this, thus taking, again, an hour and me being fairly certain that those other techniques are also not in the box. So I can focus more at that higher end detail and not worry about these lower ends. Okay. So in this case, what I've done, again, I have logging turned on to the kazoo. So I've got 1.4 million records in my particular output. So I've got a fairly large report. And so, again, it's a CSV. This is the raw output of my box. I immediately do things automatically just because of habit to make things more readable. As you can see, the spreadsheet has a lot of data in it. Don't let that intimidate you, because it's how you parse through the data that's going to help. Being that's obviously big, I'm going to split the screen. Making it easy for me. Split, and I lost my left side panel, so let's try that again. I got to be somewhere else. Split the screen and get my left column over here so I can see this, and get my upper column so I can see way up there. And this way, as I scroll around, I still have the data that I want, right? I can now see the left side and I can see the top side. So now I got all this data. There's lots of stuff in here. It's like, where do I start? For me personally, the goal here is going to end up being that I want to find the date of the event, right? I'm trying to focus that in, because then I can use all the other logs or any of the other indicators or any of my other tools to focus in that time period. That's what I'm after if I'm doing a lab analysis or incident response. But in this case, I got a system. I have no idea what the state is. So we have lots of columns to pick from. And the computer name, if I was to do multiples in one spreadsheet, I obviously need that piece of information. But one of the biggest things I tell people that we have to enable, that we fail the tool for if it is not set, is processing command line. So Excel's great for this, because if I go to data and I hit filter and I turn filtering on, which will take a minute because this spreadsheet's ginormous, I can now look at the data, and eventually when it finally parses through the data, and I can now kind of group things together or dedupe things to say, yeah, that's not the droid I'm looking for, and exclude it from the results. And I take this massive spreadsheet and I shrink it very quickly. And remember, this is 1.4 million records. I do have whitelists available to me, right? We have an IP address whitelist. We have a process name and process command line whitelist. The IP address whitelist is by source, destination, and destination port. We're ignoring source port. If you do this, you probably understand why we do that. There's just too many of them. And in the process name, bad way to exclude things, but there are cases you do want to do that with a high return value, because there may be process names that you want to exclude, but yet the command line will be totally different. So you really want to focus at the command line. But the pair of those allow you to really parse this data down drastically if you want. The third is the file and registry auditing location. So if you turn on file and registry auditing, which I do in my labs, they're highly audited so that when malware affects a reg key or drops files to certain directories that I want to watch, how do I know where to watch for those? The malware management reports that we spoke about earlier, that gives me a clue where to look for. There's a very consistent pattern of the kind of places to look for. And so, I can obviously sort this data any way I want. We have headers, so I can say, just give me process command line. And, I can immediately see there's the NVIDIA login. I really don't care about the NVIDIA login. So what I want to do is take the filtering capability of Excel, now that it's deduped everything, and I can say, I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to get rid of everything in the command line. The one thing I definitely cannot get rid of is, well, it's under N, so I got to go up to N, is I got to keep the NAs, because that means I don't want to get rid of the ones that don't have a command line, because that's something different. So I'm gonna look through this and say, all right, so are any of these items here something that I absolutely know from either experience or malware management that it's not something I want to look at? This top line has a lot of garbage in it, so I'm just going to leave it. AT broker, yeah, let's say I'm not sure, so I'm going to leave it. But I happen to know this is the NVIDIA normal way of the NVIDIA thing. I don't want to see that in my traffic. So that means all this traffic you see on my screen right here, right, is going to disappear because I'm unselecting it. And I can go through here and say, yeah, I really don't need to see any of the mobile device stuff. It's in the right place. It has the right look. I see this pretty consistently. And when you see these kind of quantities, that's what the whitelist is for. You'll take the spreadsheet, for example, and I can just copy and paste the NVIDIA into the whitelist after I've determined, either through hash verification if you want to go through the hashing mechanism, or however you decide you're going to trust this, and throw it out of my results. And so I can come down here and say, okay, let's see. I don't common files log. Let's leave those in there. I'm not sure what that is. VMware. Okay, I've got ESXi, so I know what that is. Dropbox. Well, let's see. Is it in the right place? Program files, x86. Yes. These are pretty typical for Dropbox. I've got all the Chrome stuff. Obviously, our browsers, we're logging that, but I'm going to ignore the browsers because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for specific binaries in this at this point. Here's the Google update occurring. I can ignore all that. Here's a gum thing, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. It's Google update. Nah, I'm going to take it out. Here's Intel's management software. I have a RAID on this particular box, so I don't need to see that data either. Logitech, well, we're on a webcam, so I don't need to see that either. Mozilla Firefox, again, I'm not interested in the browser at this point. I can always go back and open up to everything once I get some time area that I want to focus on. And I can come through here. Here's NVIDIA's drivers. Yeah, they're in the right place. There's nothing odd here. Here's NXLog client that I run. Here's the Skype stuff running. Common files, Apple. Here's Logitech stuff. Here's program files for Microsoft Shared, HP OfficeJet stuff for the printer. All right, I'm going to leave that one in here. Rapid storage, again, we know what that is. Office, the Office kicking off. We can see Excel. I have Outlook, PowerPoint. Let's say I'll leave a Word one in there just because I play with Word malware a lot. And Microsoft Security. So here's the Security Essentials suite. I go down here and here's the Realtek audio drivers, VNCs running for remote control. Here's the media player stuff. All right, that seems okay to me. And then here we're getting the user space. So here's where I'm going to pay close attention. User space. This is where most commodity malware is going to attack you. So now pay kind of attention to what's going on here. Google Home users, yeah, I've seen that before. Logitech webcam looks okay. Since I just installed that, we're good. Webcam stuff here. Temp, etc. Roaming Foxit, yep, I've got Foxit on here. We're good. The Microsoft framework stuff's executing. Yeah, experience tells me, regedit ran. Don't know why. We'll take a look at that. We got some software distribution. Yeah. System 32. These are the actual executables. Audio DG. Well, obviously we're on a Skype call, so this is normal. And I'm now at the bottom of the list. list, and we'll keep the command shell stuff because that potentially is fishy. And so I'm going through this defrag. We saw the defrag ran, yada, yada, yada. And boom, here's Notepad running a couple times. Here's where I'm opening up some batch files. We're good there. Regedit 32 ran. We'll leave that. RAS servo, we'll leave that. Power config, we know we've got energy savings scenarios going. There's SC starting and stopping services. I'll keep that. Service hosts, these are pretty typical. You would whitelist these out because these start up on boot. They obviously service hosts can be misused. And I can go through this really quickly and kind of determine if there's focal areas that I want to look at. And I'll scroll down here. There's WBM embedding. That's always going to look that way. I don't need to worry about that. I'm looking for the odd WBM launches. Here's the driver install for all the NVIDIA stuff that I did, or all the Logitech stuff I did. Boom, boom, boom. Remember, I'm going through 1.4 million records. And here's run DLL32, might be important, so we'll pay attention to that. Definitely malware can utilize this to launch DLLs. And spool drivers, okay. And again, initial responses, these look okay. These are all the tasks running that are normally scheduled. There's a ton of them, obviously, in the system. I can come back and look at these if I find some other data that's interesting in the time frame. When login occurred, let's take a look at that. There's PuTTY executing. We'll take a look at that. And installer, and then the blanks. And so we won't worry about the blanks. And I hit OK, and suddenly now the amount of data I have just shrank by. If you look at this real quickly, the NAs are now the dominant thing. These are all the things that have no command line. So I took 1.4 million records and went through here and said, wow, that's all I got. So now I can focus a little better at what's going on here and go really quickly. Are any of these odd? They really aren't. So now I can even filter those out even further. And I said, well, clearly don't need that RAS server. I don't need that. Yeah, that looks okay. AT broker looks good. We'll leave that one in there. Scroll down here. Intel, we'll get rid of that one. Office WinWord, I'll leave that one in there just so we have some data. Regedit, we'll leave that one in there. And System 30 Command EXE, we'll leave those in there. And get rid of the RAS server. There's a big bulk of that. And hit OK. And suddenly look at the amount of command lines that were executed in my box. That quickly, I went through 1.4 million records, and I can tell you these are the only potential suspicious commands that were executed on a box on my system. So right now, I very quickly said, yeah, this box is clean.
Okay.
You got a tool that can do that? I know I don't have a tool that can do that. I've got all kinds of other data in here in regards to what launched these command lines. And so I potentially, the parent that launched that. And as we scroll over, the reason this is so wide is different event codes have different data associated with it. So some of these items are going to take up 3 or 4 columns. Another event code will take up 3 or 4 columns, and so we keep stacking those to the right. At some point, we'll address.
And you've mentioned in the past that certain event codes mean certain things. So,
correct.
If you've got event codes that are red flags for you, you can further filter those things, right?
Correct. So I can filter specifically by event codes, right? Because we have the coding here. So let's say I want to focus in on only. I want to look at only the Sysmon. I happen to have Sysmon running in my box. It's one of the things we look for in our side. Not the free version that you get will not have this because it's not built into Windows. And I want to say I only want to focus in on the event ones because they give me a hash of the files. So if I get down to the point where and again, this is a malware lab, right? So I definitely want to have hashes as an option to me. If let's say these are suspicious files to me, I will capture the hashes, which of course, what do I do with those? Virus total. And you can see at a 1.4 million records, I'm down to a handful that I'm going to actually go investigate hashes for. Or let's say I want to focus on, for those of us, some people that really like the network side will say, all right, let's look at the network side. So I'm going to deselect everything and pick the Sysmon 3 events and then also the 5156 Windows Firewall events. And so now I can focus, again, this data no longer becomes useful because it's focusing at the process execution. Now what I'm after is what the image that launched the connection, which is what the Windows Firewall will give you. It's very powerful in that that you can find, okay, I went to some IP address, some destination IP address, but what actually was the application that went there? So if this was a suspect, if Firefox was a suspect malware executable, I would now have the external IPs that I would need to go plug into Splunk or potentially ask my network guys, block these. And I'm actually going to give you an example of exactly that here in a second. But this is an example of how you use this tool to investigate a system and determine whether or not it's clean or not. And again, now I'm focused at these particular events. I can go through here and say, well, because the filtering dedupe stuff, you can see the list is pretty short. I can say, well, what do I really want to look at that's interesting? Yeah, not a lot in here that I want to see. There's nothing here. It's interesting. Office, Word. Let's say I have Word running. So am I investigating Word malware? Maybe something got launched there. So we'll kind of look and see if Word communicated out to any. Again, we're looking at network events. Now, what apps communicated outbound? And this is where the IP whitelist comes in. So if you're running stuff that normally connects out to Dropbox or Google Cloud, all your Google stuff that's normal, all your Adobe stuff that's normal, all your Microsoft stuff normal, you whitelist that out, and you wouldn't even see this in here. But I left this wide open so we can get a really good demo of how fast we can parse through data with this tool and get an idea. And we can see specifically what IP addresses B and C might be visiting in case that was the culprit in regards to communication channels. And that's basically how we use the tool. There's other event codes that we collect. We won't go through all of them. It's pretty extensive. But tasks that are scheduled, firewall changes that occur, services that are started and stopped and or added to the system, processes that execute, shares that are connected. These are the top 10 event type things that I report. I'm actually speaking at SplunkConf next week, or actually last week. I spoke at SplunkConf, if we're doing this in the future. And these are the kind of things I'll share with them, saying, you want to start somewhere, Windows logging cheat sheet, these event codes, start here, get really good at this. It'll make obvious sense where you expand from there. And then obviously all the cases, states of the task scheduler and what happens here. That's what these commands are. And then in stuff that Brian and I use, we're playing with sysmon and other tools, maybe future features possibly. And this data then becomes very usable very quickly. But that fast, I was able to say, yeah, this system's 95% clean. I have a 99% certainty I'm in good shape.
Very nice.
And
can you,
so, do you
Michael,
have an example of something malicious?
Sure. Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, can you unplug your mic and plug it back in? It's getting a little static. I don't know, Brake, can you hear that as well?
Yeah, I heard a little bit. That's all right. It's not annoying as mine, so.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
So far.
All right, so let's look at a box I investigated that had a crypto event. This is a great example of why file auditing would be very, very important. I tell everybody, hey, where do I start with file auditing? So we're not talking the auditing settings. This can be very confusing to people. The auditing settings, the advanced audit policies is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going into Explorer, and I'll actually do it so we can see what we're talking about. I'll actually go into Explorer, drag the window over here so you guys can see it. And I want to say, I tell everybody, you must go into Windows, System 32, for example, the WBM directory, because this is a great injection point for the bad guys. Right click, properties, security, advanced, auditing. This is what I'm talking about. So I can set this and say, I want to add everyone. Right, so now I'm turning on auditing for files, but this is the key. You have to pay very close attention to what you're setting. If you're in Windows directory, never ever set subfolders. You will create so many entries in your logs that the noise will overwhelm you and you won't get any value. In the WBM directory, on the other hand, you can very easily leave this and say, what I'm after is new stuff. I don't care about Microsoft updates. I'm worried about malware being dropped. That's brand spanking new DLL that's going to be injected. So I'm going to look for creates. And I want to look for permission changes, take ownership, and change permissions. That right there is all I'm going to do and apply that. I now am collecting those file auditing items. I would do the same thing in the registry for the run keys and any auto runs that I'd be interested in collecting, right? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about in file auditing. So the unique thing about this particular case, this is a captured log of a reboot of a CryptoLocker event. Again, where do we start? I'm going to go ahead and say, well, I got to get rid of the noise that is normal, so let's go ahead and filter that out and say, well, command line obviously is important. Here's the command line over here, shift it over. and say, sometimes it's easier for people's eyes just to go ahead and sort the data. So that is an option you can do, obviously, at a time, so that the stuff's in some sort of logical order before you filter. And go ahead and say, all right, so what's on this box? Same routine we just went through, clearly a lot less, right? We need the NAs, so we're going to unselect everything, put NA back in here and say, all right, what is this Realtek audio? All right, I'm going to let that slide. Tortoise SVN, okay, we know what SVN is. Bob, app data, roaming, what the hell's that? I want to see those. Weird named files in roaming. CryptoLocker's known for using the roaming directory. Explore, well, maybe it phoned home to something. Command.exe, let's see what happened there. The consent looks like something maybe elevated. VSC service. That happens to be volume shadow copy. That's interesting. That shouldn't have executed normally. So let's see what we get with just those commands. VSS admin. Let's see what we got. So there's, I selected what? Half of them? I hit OK. Now what I can see is some stuff that I worked on. I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to see this data. That's just me accepting the EULA, so we'll throw that out. Scroll this over a bit so we can get a better view of it. And we'll obviously get rid of this EULA, and we'll say, yeah, we do not need to see that data, and hit OK. And suddenly now what we have is a very short list of information. Now, this is a suspect box. I actually did not know what was on this box when I started this process, when I ran this. I immediately see this. I see that in app data roaming, there's an executable going on, okay? Right now, we have no network activity because CryptoLocker does not do that. It basically will drop stuff on there, and you get these HTML files that tells you where to go. But there's no communication channels back after the thing's doing the crypto process. You can see here that RabbitMQ is on here. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to get rid of RabbitMQ. I don't really care about RabbitMQ. Again, scroll over so we can actually read this. I wish filtering would auto shift on us. So let's get rid of that piece of noise. And suddenly we're down to a handful of events. So the interesting thing that points out on this is it's very apparent very quickly that this is the malware event right here. So what's happening is the executable occurred here. It then called, command.exe called the roaming new variable. It actually changed names. So as you launch the crypto malware, it writes a different copy with a different name in a different location. I would see those names actually if I do the basic analysis on it. And then oddly enough, VSS admin was executed, and it actually deleted the volume shadow copies. And why is that important in CryptoLocker? I can't do a restore. Now, what's also apparent here is there's no file auditing or registry auditing turned on this particular system that I did. I only turned on what I needed to make LogMD work. But that quickly, I'm able to determine this is where the malware resides. This is what I need to go clean up. And oh, by the way, the volume shadow copies got whacked as well. So there's an example of a malicious system.
Very nice.
And then the last example we have is a big event. Oh, lots of stuff in here. Okay, same routine. Let's go ahead and sort the data off of something just to make it easier to consume to the eye. And say command. I'll start with command line, and I'm going to go ahead and turn filtering on. And let's go ahead and way that over to the right. All right, so we want to be over here, and I'm most interested, obviously, in the command line. And again, same routine. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's take a look at this. And let's get rid of all the stuff that we know is just normal noise in Windows. Again, how do I know that? Malware management and the reports that are done by the malware analyst companies doing the IR firms, and clearly the reports that are done by AV companies kind of give you a clue of what's going on. Plus, you can kind of look at some of these and say, do I really care that ConHost is opening a session? ConHost is the window around everything that gets launched, and each one has a session. Yeah, that's not telling me anything or ever will tell me anything in regards to what I'm looking for. So I'm going to say, let's get rid of all those. I'm going to keep this, get rid of all these con hosts. A tribs, that's interesting. I'm pretty sure on this box that trib was not something that I executed. Again, this is a lab scenario where I actually executed a payload. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to look at the NVIDIA stuff. No, I know NVIDIA is the driver of the lab box, so I'm going to ignore that. Setup ctemp, what happened here? That's interesting. I don't really recognize that. I'm going to keep it. Again, Chrome, we're going to ignore Chrome because I launched Chrome to investigate stuff after the fact. Google Update, let's get rid of that. Install Office, BSS Sync, shutdown. We'll keep the Office stuff. Excel's me. We'll keep the Word stuff. Because that happened to be the thing that I launched was a malicious Word document. There's the template for Word. We'll keep that. Let's see, shared Office. Yeah, okay, we'll keep that just to see what it is. The Microsoft Security Client agents, yeah, not interested. It didn't detect anything, so I'm going to ignore the fact that it triggered anything to begin with. Go to meeting because I share with other people what happened, and then I'm going to go ahead and say app data is very important to me for sure. I'm going to select all these. Bob was up to nefarious stuff maybe, and come down here. There's the .NET stuff. regedit could or could not have been me after the fact. Anti-malware, could care less. Audio, I could care less. Command line, I for sure want to keep. DLL, make cab, maybe something was compacted and sent out. MSIE exec, we'll keep that. Notepad, clearly I don't recognize opening those files, so let's say we'll keep those. And we're running through these, boom, boom, boom. And what else is in here? Search filter, search protocol host. Snipping tool was me taking screenshots. Sysprep, I don't remember running Sysprep. That's interesting. We'll look at that in a second. VSS. We'll look at that, and let's see what else is in here. Were manager, looks like something crashed. That may never be good. Those don't tell me anything, so I'm going to ignore those. This doesn't tell me anything. We're going to ignore those. Process ID, those GUIDs might be important later, but not right now. That looks interesting. Oh, CHCP. So there was a language check. That's odd. It's my lab box. Who would do that? Consent, something asked for consent. May or may not be me launching in admin mode. CScript, I don't remember launching any CScript. Curl, definitely me. But of course, if you're not sure, keep it. Go down a little further. Keep the NAs. NetSH Advanced Firewall, that's interesting. Ping, I don't recognize those pings. Let's keep those. Task hosts may be important later, but right now, again, we're good. So I'm going to say let's keep just that. All right, so what do we find? Well, this is interesting. There's a batch file, display bat. And again, here's the parent command line. I'm going to shrink this a little bit or widen this a little bit, but let's move it out of the way for a moment. Move the hash out of the way for a moment. What I want to see is the commands. So the attrib command ran right here against these files here. TeamViewer, what normal process would possibly change the permissions and attrib TeamViewer in a directory where TeamViewer is not installed? Malware. So now we're on to something. So here's some batch files. Here's some renamed TeamViewer files. Again, so we know now that this is potentially suspicious. So we'll go ahead and say, that looks really interesting to me. And I now have something to focus on. Okay, Office BSS Sync. I can probably get rid of that. This is interesting because this is the event that I actually executed. So more than likely, this is probably out of sequence. So let's go to sort. This is looking at a sequence to me. If I do that, I'll get everything back, so we'll leave it there. Normal dot was opened with Notepad+. That was me, so I'm not going to mark that. This is interesting. Temp 9.exe. Okay, this is a lab box. I did not execute 9.exe. Here's more, and we'll click on that. And here's reg tlibs display drivers in that same directory. That happens to be the odd thing that that was launched. Here's some more batch files. Here's we'll highlight those. Clearly not something I did. Here's some captured. So one of the tricks I do in my lab analysis is I create a batch file in my known directories that I'm monitoring for, and I capture anything dropped into those directories to catch the thing that Betcher talked about, where malware will run, write something, and then delete itself. So what I'm trying to do is actually capture that for further analysis. So I managed to, in the course of this malware executing, capture the batch files and VB script that occurred when the malware executed. regedit was launched, could have been by me. Don't know at this point until we look further. Here's some interesting directories. Bob, app data local, some funky name, some funky executable. Yeah. And if you look, the command line actually executes 9.exe with some parameter of 3. Yeah, that can't be good. Here's some automations or changes to the Windows firewall. Now,
so yep. What kind of malware did you end up finding on this?
This turned out to be a malicious Word document that contained some VB script, some macros, right, built into its macro Word stuff. It wrote these batch files and VB files to disk, which then executed, modifying the Windows firewall. You can actually see through the data of the firewall what policy got changed. In this case, Open Explorer to the internet is what it did. And it dropped malware. It made the communication out to the CNC, and it then went ahead and pulled down the team viewer to the environment to give them a backdoor to the box.
Okay.
It also here checked the language of the system, so they wanted to know what language the system was on to give them an idea where they were. Here's the funky VB script that was executed on the box as well. So here's me curling it. That's not bad. That's just me doing stuff. The other unique, actually, no, this is actually bad. This is a different environment. They actually went out to Dropbox and pulled the payload down from Dropbox. So here's an indication where cloud storage is being used in the course of this malware. And there's the list of the malicious activities and how quickly I was able to ascertain them through LogMD. I know the locations of the malware now. I know at least I can cut the head off the snake. I did not have any entries for file and registry auditing, again, to point out the persistence mechanisms of where maybe wrote to the run key or any services installed. That's really something you should do in a lab box, is turn on this file and reg auditing so you can capture this as a part of it. And now I can also see the communication that happened to the box. So now if we scroll over and look at the executables that are going on, let's actually sort this by image name. No, where are you? Too far up. Come on, new process. Where are you? Nope, PID after that. There we go. So we'll do this only because it makes it easy to filter stuff out. I don't want Chrome. And this is the main piece that I'm going after very quickly. And remember I said how long this takes me after an hour. I know I went to Chrome afterwards, so I don't want this. I definitely want WinWord. I know I want to launch that. I definitely want to see where curl went. I definitely want to see where the malware went. And we'll just pick a couple of these so it's real obvious. And I want to see where TeamViewer went and where 9.exe went. Let's see if we caught anything. We sure did. So now I have the IP addresses that I know for a fact involved in this particular malware payload that I can say, all right, if anybody else visited these IPs, they are infected. Now, how long did it take me?
Not very long.
Not very long, 15 minutes, only because I'd
Cool.
explain it, right? So that's how powerful this tool is in a lab and or suspect system. This is the concept of comparing, using the good to find the bad, using what we know, the behavior that triggers with malware, even if it's APT. This methodology came about from fighting the Chinese. And so we're applying that logic of the behavior to what we want to look for in the logs. Yeah, I could have cleared the logs and this is worthless to you. Not really. I would have seen you cleared the logs, and now I would immediately not pass go and have that box reimaged. Or I would just do manual, old-fashioned, good system compared to bad system malware discovery on it, and I would do it the old-fashioned way. That is a huge indicator. Oh, I logged PowerShell command line, but I just executed execution bypass. Okay, but that tells me that's what you did, so now I know to use this other mechanism. So even if you clear this stuff out, it would lead me to go to an approach that speeds things up. Yeah. So it's quite valuable. So that fast, I can give you the tidbits of what happened with this malware. So I now can tweak my security tools to look for these artifacts very quickly, faster than anything else I've ever used, other than my.
Well, Mr. Betcher, congratulations on a very successful application, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it takes off, and we're constantly adding new things, new features to make it even more better, more robust.
Okay. So Michael's been accepted at DerbyCon for a discussion, and he's going to unveil that at DerbyCon. So if you're at DerbyCon, you can go by and see Mr. Gough, and then when you're done, you can actually go see the creator out in the hallway because he doesn't need to go to Michael's talk because he's lived it.
Can you get a new handle, V'ger? Can you give you a label, Leroy, instead of Leroy, call you V'ger?
V'ger,
what's that?
V'ger, Star Trek 1?
Yeah. He's not a Trekkie fan like that, so he doesn't understand.
That's classic.
Hey, I've seen all of the TOS.
Oh my God. Okay.
What?
Anyway.
What?
You've seen the motion picture, though, right?
Star Trek motion picture is what we were
A
talking about.
long time ago, but I'll rewatch it pretty soon.
Okay, cool. All right, well, that was a great how-to, and we'll be posting that on our YouTube channel so that everybody can see that. I know the audio on the podcast is not conducive to understanding. So, Mr. Betcher, we're going to finish this up now. How do we get a hold of you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can reach me at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHER, PWNED.
Right on. And Michael Gough, how would they get a hold of you?
I'm at Hacker Hurricane is my blog and my Twitter handle, and you can find me at malwarearchaeology.com, and you can find both Betcher and I at logmd.com. Almost screwed that one up. log-md.com.
Right on.
We are not the tree
Yeah,
doctors.
if you type
I think
in
that will become apparent.
Yes.
Okay. So the official BreakSec podcast Twitter is at BreakSec, BRAKESEC. I'm at Brian Break, BRYAN, BRY. God, I need a drink. At Brian Break, BRYAN, BRAK.
MOUSC.
And I thought that was awesome. And we will be talking to you guys more. I've got a lot more questions, but we're setting it. It's really long podcast. So everyone have a great week. And if you're at DerbyCon, I hope we see you guys. Okay. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.